So, there's this new documentary about Melania Trump, and it just did something, well, pretty incredible. Audiences are calling it a masterpiece, this electrifying standing room only event, but professional critics, they're saying it's one of the worst things they've ever seen. So, how on earth can one single movie get such wildly different reactions? That's what we're going to dig into today.
And look, when we say divide, we're not talking about a little disagreement here. This is a massive, almost unbelievable canyon in how people see this thing. And to really get it, we've got to start with the numbers. How did it actually do with the people who paid to see it?
Okay, so in its opening weekend alone, this documentary raked in over $7 million. For any documentary, that is just a staggering number.
And this wasn't just a good opening. This was the biggest box office debut for any documentary that wasn't, a concert film in the last 10 years. So by any commercial measure you can think of, this thing was a huge, huge success.
And if you listen to the people who were actually in the theaters, the vibe inside totally matched those box office numbers. They're talking about packed houses, like standing room only situations. People were apparently cheering, the whole thing felt interactive, the energy was just electric. So, okay, a commercial hit, an audience favorite, case closed, right? Well, not even close.
And this is where the story just completely splits right down the middle. Because while you had audiences cheering in these packed theaters, a very different story was being written by the professional film critics.
You can see this divide perfectly on a site like Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, look at this. The audience score, a near-perfect 99%. And the critics, a measly 9%. That's not a gap, that is a canyon.
I mean, just listen to the words being used here. Audiences are calling it electric, and critics are calling it a void of pure nothingness. Moviegoers are cheering, and the reviewers, they're calling it empty foul and worse than we imagined. So, what is going on here? How is this even possible?
Well, according to the commentators we're following for this, the explanation, it isn't really about the movie itself. They argue it's actually a symptom of something much, much bigger happening in our society.
They've got a name for it, the elite disconnect. And the core idea here is pretty simple. It's the theory that the folks who shape our culture, in media and Hollywood, they kind of live in a bubble, completely separate from the values and opinions of a massive part of the American public.
So, just how big is this group we're talking about? Well, the hosts point directly to the 77 million people who voted for Donald Trump back in 2020. Their argument is that this represents a huge, underserved audience that the entertainment industry is either totally ignoring or, maybe worse, actively pushing away.
And it really all comes down to that famous Michael Jordan quote, "Republicans buy sneakers too." The panel's point is pretty much a business one. Ignoring a customer base this massive isn't just a cultural blind spot, it's just plain bad for business.
And the panel gets really specific with their criticism of the reviewers, calling them, and this is a quote, navel-gazing sycophants. They suggest that to even become a critic for a major outlet, you need the right connections, and that creates this insulated little group of people who have likely, and this is their words, never even met a Trump supporter.
Okay, so here's the crucial point, at least according to these hosts. This isn't just some one-off fluke. They actually see it as a sign of something much bigger coming down the pike. And to really drive home the scale of the success, the hosts made a really striking comparison. You take this film's $7 million opening, and you put it up against a political documentary about, say, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which opened to about $178,000. I mean, the difference there is it's absolutely staggering. And this success, they argue, signals the start of a whole new parallel track in entertainment, what they're calling non-woke media. And for them, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right-wing, but it's just content that exists outside of what they see as Hollywood's main political culture.
And this is where the whole thing becomes explicitly political. The hosts basically suggest that a cultural success story like this could be an indicator, they use the word indicia, for the upcoming midterm elections. It's like proof that a silent majority is still super energized and ready to go.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last, really fascinating question. Is something like a movie's box office numbers just entertainment? Or can a massive disconnect like this, between the audience's 99% and the critics' 9%, actually tell us something much deeper about where the entire country is headed?